morning, Eric. How's it going today?
Good morning, Jahir. I'm doing well. I cannot complain.
Well, first of all, happy Friday. And I would like to let you know that you are my 38th interview. So this is pretty exciting.
Yes, yes.
And I know
Congrats.
you're turning,
Yeah.
and I know you're turning 38 this year, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Big 3-8. I'm not lying. I'm getting to the age now where I'm forgetting how old I am. I always think people were just joking around when they'd be like, "Wait, how old am I?" But no joke. And I don't know if it's just because of last year and not really celebrating and really doing much. But I keep forgetting. It's like, what, I'm 37 or 36, or is it 38 this year? So I'm starting going back and doing the math. But yes, it is 38. I was born in 83. So I think that adds up, right?
Well, I turned 25 last year, and that was like we were so deep in the pandemic, so I didn't really do anything. But my mom, she got a cake for me and got some. I wanted barbecue, so we got TJ ribs, and
Mhm.
we as a my mom, my grandmother, and I we ate barbecue and cake, and that was my birthday. And I went for a walk. I went on two walks that day. So that was
Nice,
my
nice.
25.
Well, that's not a bad way to ring it in.
No, I don't think so either. A lot of the people that I've interviewed, half of the people I know, and half the people, the interview is my first time knowing them. But I've known you for a couple of years now. Where would you say was the first moment that you met me or knew of me as a person?
I knew your name and your resume before I knew you as a person. So we met, or I knew of you through the Brotherhood Sisterhood Committee that I've served on for now. These years start blending in. So it's probably 8 years or so, which is a now a initiative or an award that the Capital Area United Way gives out in conjunction with a few other organizations that partner on it. But it's housed under the Capital Area United Way brand. And the first year that we were giving out this award called the Pass the Torch Award. So let me go back. The Brotherhood Sisterhood Award typically awards two honorees who have committed their life's work to dismantling racism or talking about racial justice and combating injustice. And usually we get two people that are from different spaces, but have been doing the work nonetheless. And so this has been around for 50 plus years. It started under the, it's a National Association, Organization of Jews and Christians. And that eventually went to 100 Black Men and Forum 35, and then it went to Capital Area United Way. So fast forward 55 plus years, we decided to, a few years ago of thinking, okay, most of these folks that are awarded or, have done a life's work, but what about the next generation of people who are doing the work that we also need to give them their flowers and honor them to say, hey, good job. Keep doing more of that because we need to make sure that we're showing you that we appreciate the work that you're doing too. And that is, you were one of the nominees that first year and won the award. So I still remember reading your resume or some of your career work that you've been doing with the 821 Project. And I think I met you for the first time at our little pre-reception party that we held. And that's where we got to meet some of the honorees. So I think that was 2018 or 19. Again, after these years, I'm starting to get mixed up on. But yeah, I think that's the first time we met. I hope that's the first time we met.
Yeah, I think so as well, because the Pass the Torch Award I received was in very at the very top of 2019.
Okay.
And I also remember that I was very fortunate to be awarded as well with I think your mentor Maxine Crump. We
Yeah.
also were awarded at the same time. And just to be very quick about this thought, because this interview is about you, not me. But I
Sure.
wanted to say that that interview, that I mean, that award could not have come at the best time. I mean, that was the time where I was starting to wonder if my work was impactful. I've been doing it for about 2 years and was slowly growing. But I had a very difficult summer and I almost wanted to completely dissolve A21. Like I had told my mom, I jokingly told her that I am done with this. I feel like this is
Mhm.
not fulfilling me. The community doesn't want this. I'm going to do a couple of events, close out A21, and then move to Massachusetts and go wait tables or something. This whole living in Baton Rouge thing isn't working. But instead, I took a month to just recenter myself, kind of regain my focus. And then when I came back from my hiatus, I presented at a conference in Texas, and
Mhm.
I was given some knowledge of the Pass the Torch Award application process. And I guess because I had spent a lot of that year of 2018 feeling demoralized and I finally had this energy, I wanted to really prove that, like, I was like, you know what? I may not get this award, but I'm going to demonstrate just how powerful I am as a person to the best of my ability. And when it was announced that I got the award, I was extremely emotional because that was almost like a way of saying, now don't pay attention to the people that aren't in the room, just do the work because you
Sure,
never know who's watching or
sure.
who is seeing what you're doing. And this is just a message I have for everybody. You never know who's watching.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And you couldn't have been a better year than being up there with Maxine as well. And I think was it Ralph Bender, I think might have been the other one.
Mm-hmm.
But two other people, I mean, people that I speak with almost on a regular
Mm-hmm.
basis. Me and Maxine were talking yesterday. So great for you. That's one of the committees that I've been working on for years now that I still go back. And I was telling my friend this morning, it's like, I don't know, this is a very quick trajectory that happened for me when I moved to Baton Rouge some 16 years ago. And Brotherhood, Sisterhood is one of those committees that I've been on the longest, but it's some of the most inspirational work that I do. So yeah, again, congratulations to you and everyone else who's been awarded, because you just give me more fire to keep doing the work. Because it is just like you, we get into those down times where we may feel like we're alone, that we don't have a lot of help and support, and you kind of hear the negativity in your head and not necessarily look at the positives that are happening in your life and the people that you are impacting. So thanks again.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity and the acknowledgement, and I will continue to do the work to show that I was deserving of the award. That's my goal is to make sure that I am improving year to year and showing that every award that I have been blessed to receive, I deserve.
Great.
So, enough about me. I'm going to get into you. And the first question I always like to ask to start a conversation with regards to a person that I'm interviewing is, where you're from, because that's where the journey begins.
Yeah.
The series is expanding our roots, so we got to go to the roots, where the roots lie. So where are you from?
Well, I'm born and raised in Alexandria, Louisiana, which is about 2 hours or so from Baton Rouge. It's in the central part of the state. I know folks from south of I-10 here in Baton Rouge or New Orleans think is Alexandria is North Louisiana, but it's really literally called the Crossroads in Sinlaw. So I'm born and raised in Alexandria. Mom and dad in the house until my parents were divorced at 8. But I grew up with an older brother and older sister, a much older brother and older sister that were 8 and 12 or 13 years older than I was, because they came through my mom's previous marriage. But we were all raised under the same household. My dad probably raised them as long as he raised me, for the most part. So, grew up there, then eventually a divorced household. Mom was a teacher, dad was a car salesman. So I experienced that, that shaped me in a lot of ways. I went through a private school for preschool all the way through the 6th grade, and then public school from middle school all the way through high school. So that also shaped me and my views and how I value education. And then after I graduated, I went to Northwestern, which is in Natchitoches, Louisiana, about an hour south of Shreveport, and did 4 years there. But I'll track back a little bit to tell you who I am and where I'm from. My dad had a stroke, I think it was my freshman year in high school. I was about 14 or so. Went through a few years of rehabbing, kind of getting back on his feet, but eventually had another heart attack, and he passed away when I was 16, a junior in high school. So that was one of the first big impacts of my life, of losing someone. In addition to having none of my grandmothers have been around, they were already passed before I was born. Matter of fact, my mom's mom was buried a day before I was born. Seeing my grandfathers pass away, I had an aunt die of breast cancer. I had my godmother die as well. I had a lot of people. Death was a common theme in my life, and loss was a common theme in my life very early on. So then I get to college, and my second semester in college as a freshman, my mom had been having some health issues, but it was like she'd go to Houston. She'd come back, she'd do some breathing treatments. They couldn't really figure out what it was, if it was something on the lungs or whatever, but they didn't really have a diagnosis that, provided some like deep treatment. And, I left on a Monday to go back to school, drove up, and then got a call that night. I just finished eating dinner. My sister called me on the phone, and I could hear it in her voice the minute she called me that something was like seriously wrong. And she said her mom had passed away. She had a massive heart attack at the house. My brother was there. He tried to kind of help her. The EMS came, couldn't save her. And that was that. So here I am, my world shook, don't have a lot of help, don't have a lot of folks around, sister's in a different state, brother's kind of figure out his own life. And, I had to kind of pause for a minute and then get back to the grind of college. Because I know my mom's, one of the biggest things to her was education. Like one of her proudest moments was me just graduating high school. I thought that was a given, but I have a picture of her. It's one of my favorite pictures with her, is a smile on her face after I had my, cap and gown and I got my diploma. But I knew the next thing was the next thing. So it was go to college and get your degree there. And she valued that. She was she went to Grambling herself back when you could only go through those paths. Went to Grambling, then came back and got her master's and a master's plus 30 from Northwestern. So I went through 4 years, graduated with honors, took summer school classes, grinded, taking 18 hours, both semesters my senior year, just to make sure I did not have to come back to summer school, and did it all pretty much making A's and B's for most of the time. And so I attribute that to the foundation that I had and the support, because I have a shaky foundation. Going through all that trauma, I would have never come out on the other end the way I did. And so that is, in a sense, where I'm from. And then I moved to Baton Rouge in 05. And about, I guess this was June or so, 05, almost immediately once I graduated, I moved from Natchitoches to South Louisiana, because I just wanted to get into South Louisiana. North Louisiana or Central Louisiana was not the vibe for me. I wanted to get a little bit more of a city life. And then I moved to Baton Rouge. And that was like the next chapter of my life of trying to figure out who I am and where I was going.
So from what I'm hearing, it seems as though loss but industriousness kind of informed your formative years, because I'm thinking about that early 20s, like upbringing, like small child up until like early 20s, like my age now. That's the time when you're trying to figure out who you are as a person, as a man, as a woman, whatever the case might be. And you're also trying to figure out what will the second quarter of my life look like. And that is very important and is very pivotal. And so my question to you now is, how did those first, I guess, 2 decades of your life, dealing with trauma, dealing with having to push through and work hard to overcome a lot of these different things, inform what you wanted for yourself when you moved to Baton Rouge?
I wanted stability. That's one thing. I think I've seen it as a common theme with folks who experience a lot of trauma and loss, is that you long for stability. And I thought I had that with the career that I was coming down here for at the time. I would later find out that instability was going to be a common theme for the next 5 or so years of my life here, even post-graduation in Baton Rouge. So that was something that I always wanted, something just of normalcy, of understanding that what's here today will be here tomorrow and the next week and the next week. Because in the environment I grew up in, it felt like there was always something that was changing or someone that was being lost. And so that families were being shaken up. My mom's older brother, he passed away on my mom's birthday, which was January 1. He drowned, fishing, doing what he loved to do in Marksville. My mom's youngest brother, my aunt, she died of breast cancer. So I saw that family, my cousins that actually live here in Baton Rouge, lose their mom, and him and their family have to go through that. My god brother, who's actually a newscaster in New Orleans now, his mom passed away, which was my mom's best friend. And that was another family shaken up. So I grew up with nothing but shakeups all throughout my childhood and those formative years. And even for me, it hit me, once I'm a teenager and then going to college, it rocked my world finally, even more closer than it already had. And so once I was kind of moving on to that next quarter of my life, I really was just searching for, man, I just want a breather. I just want stability. I know life is uncertain, but I just want some certainty that it will be all right. And I'm not constantly having to fight, and be stressed off of just about, stressed about just what's the next thing that's going to happen, because that's not a good way to live. And I've tried to get over that, through various forms of therapy and of understanding that, life is uncertain, but you don't always have to think the worst is going to happen. So I've tried to get past that. And I think I have, to a certain degree.
Yeah, I kind of want to reflect on that idea of, when you've gone through a lot of trauma and a lot of instability in your life, you want to have stability for yourself. And just thinking about the fact that a lot of what you're discussing happened in terms of family loss and loss of that support system happened when you were, I guess I would assume, to be a preteen, a teenager, and a young adult. And you usually don't have a lot of control over your circumstances when you're a young person. When you become an adult and you get grown and you have control, you want to set your life the way that you want to set it, because now you pay your own bills. You live in the house you want to live in. You can get the job that you want. You can have this autonomy that you didn't have. And as adults, we want to try and do better than our parents may have done for us, whether we felt that we were treated very well by our parents, whether we felt that we weren't treated very well, or whether we just didn't have the support system for any reason.
And I also think there's probably some part of me too that I followed the script, moving kind of on to the next chapter. When I got down to Baton Rouge in '05, it's like I'd followed the script. I'd done everything right. I'd stayed away, from trouble. I graduated in 4 years. I did all the things I was supposed to do. Then I got down here and I was like, okay, something is owed to me, and I was raised in a church. My mom played the organ at our church. I was an altar boy in our church. I went to a Catholic school for a lot of it. So it was like, spirituality, and religion to a certain extent, but it was really the faith and the spirituality that kept me grounded. And in many instances, it was like, okay, I've done some tough things. Like something is owed to me because I've done the things the right way. You start getting a little envious of, I would look at my friends when I moved to Baton Rouge. I accepted this job of selling insurance, like supplemental health insurance. And so I would be teamed up with some folks that are around the area. We would kind of go to schools and set up in teachers' lounges and sell insurance. But you just look at people like friends of mine that just had families and they had regular ass lives. Like they just went to work, went home, paid bills, and enjoyed like cookouts. And I was just like, that's all I want. Like, I just want that life, not being able to, like, not talking about, I don't know, if I can afford to put gas in my car to make it to this assignment today, because that was real life stuff that was happening to me. Or I'm dealing with this emotional trauma and stress with my girlfriend who I was living with or moved with me down here at the time. And people didn't even know what was going on in that whole regard, or being evicted out of my apartment, my first apartment I had post-college. And then my manager eventually basically fired me, which I was kind of a 1099 contract worker, selling insurance. So I was like, you can't really fire me, but I guess, but it's actually one of the better things that ever happened to us. I remember he told me, he's like, Eric, you're better than this. You should be doing way better than what you're doing. This probably ain't it for you. And it was probably one of those things that needed to be said to me, because I would have been stubborn enough to kind of keep fighting. I was a former athlete as well. So it's like, you just push through the pain, you keep pushing, you keep fighting, and eventually you'll come out on the other end. Okay. But that happened. So this was the next few years of my life. When I got to Baton Rouge, is like all that. So the stress did not stop, and it just didn't end just because you got a diploma and like, okay, now I'm here in Baton Rouge and, doing my thing. Like, no, it's more of this. Keep fighting, keep pushing.
Well, what I always like to say is, where we are is not what we're stopping at. Where we've been is not what we're stopping at. And so, I also would like to also say that I've had my own set of struggles early in life. So as far as that goes, I know how to eat pancakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I know how to make dinner and lunch out of very little in my fridge. I've had moments where if it weren't for my grandmother saying, hey, like, let's go make grocery, getting me food, or my mom helping me out with stuff, I would be very much in a bad place. So I definitely resonate with that in many, many ways. But we all have a journey, and that journey is great. And I know for a fact that where you are now is not where you started when you started in Baton Rouge. And 16 years is a very difficult thing to try and sum up, but walk me through your journey professionally of going from 2005 when you first moved to Baton Rouge to now, right at this moment, as best as you can.
So it's really it's I kind of look at my life and I look at lives in general kind of like chapters. You know, I'm a reader. I read a lot, you know, and I watch movies as well, but I read a lot too. And I always look as like, okay, that was a chapter in my life. So as I said, I moved down here in '05, worked for a couple of years doing the insurance. That did not work out. Got let go from there. I was like, okay, what do I do next? And by the way, I picked Baton Rouge. It was in between Baton Rouge, Lafayette, New Orleans. I picked Baton Rouge because it was kind of in the middle of the two. And or you know, and I had my uncle, my mom's youngest brother, and his family, my cousins, they were here. So it was like, all right, worst case scenario, if I just need a hot home cooked meal, I got them. And it was a wise choice because I leaned on them a lot at one point that I never thought I would have to. I started doing that. Then I started working as a healthcare recruiter after I started to stop doing the insurance. And I did healthcare recruiting, staffing, putting people on assignments here locally through various nursing homes and hospitals. Did that for a couple of years before I was also let go from that job because evidently I wasn't doing well enough. Then it was like, okay, now back to the drawing board. So here I am, I guess at this point, I graduated at 21. So this is probably like 24, 25. I'm thinking, all right, by this time I should be like set, man. I'm supposed to be making well over 50,000, supposed to have a car, a house, all these things that I pre-prescribed in my head of what I should have been at that point. I was way far from it. Got a job working for ADP, the payroll company, which is one of those chapters that changed my life in another direction. Is because, and I say it's not because of the work or the paycheck, but it's because of the people I got to meet. So this is probably around 2010, 2009, 2010 that I got this job. Matter of fact, my hiring manager just came by the house yesterday and dropped off a couple of bottles of wine because I referred some clients to him because he's still in the industry, but he owns his own company. So, you know, kind of full circle of how things come around. But I got that job and I was able to work with small businesses all over the city. And that had just exposed me to not only my little bubble that I had, which is basically work, the gym, bars, and restaurants on one side of the city, to now I was all over the city. I'd been around the city because I worked in those schools when I sold insurance. So I knew small pockets of, I've probably been in 95% of all schools in and around the parish. So I knew where the pockets of Baton Rouge were. But as far as meeting the people in their space in these businesses, I did not know. And then that just opened my eyes. So from mid-city to North Baton Rouge, from Plank Road to Government to South Baton Rouge, I was everywhere. And that kind of opened me up to a different scene. People that were entrepreneurs, young startups. That was a scene that I wanted to be a part of. And I formed some relationships, people I still know today and talk to. I still remember the exact spot. And that was around that 2010, 2009 era where I met them and where we were. And then I would say probably the most light bulb moment of them all was when I was reading a business report article online, and they were talking about boomerangs, which were folks that were from Baton Rouge, but moved out of the area and then came back, kind of like yourself. And one of the guys that was they referenced in there was the incoming president of Form 35, which is now Form 225, which is a large young professionals organization here in Baton Rouge. And I read about that article, and he talked to, you know, the incoming president, Slater McKay, talked about it. And of course, I could click on the comments, and he's going back and forth with people in the comments of why he decided to leave and why people don't want to stay here. He said, but we talked about Form 35, and it sounded like something that I was interested in. So Googled it, went to the website, saw that they were having a kind of a orientation of new members or prospective members, showed up to the women's club in like Spanish Town area on a rainy night, not knowing a soul in there, not knowing really much about this organization besides what I read in this article and what I saw on the website. Boo Thomas was speaking. I still remember this night. Boo Thomas, who former head of CPEX, the Center for Planning and Excellence, was speaking. I met everybody I know today that are influential people. A lot of them I met in that room at that night. And I did not know all these young 20-somethings were existing in Baton Rouge that were actually volunteering and doing all this cool stuff. And I signed up and I was like, okay, I'm a member. I signed up for the Culture Diversity Committee with Theo Richard and Venetia Winston and Jackie Stalls and people that I still talk to today. And I show up to a committee meeting at Little Village downtown. And literally, I would say the rest is history for me as far as how I changed my professional, and anything that I am today changed from that night that I went there. Because next thing I know, I was so involved in the work that my committee was doing, then that transformed into the work that the organization was doing. So I went from, like I said, and this is probably 2010, 2011, I went from like literally none of these people knowing my name to fast forward another year, I was now the co-chair of the committee. Fast forward another year from that, I'm now president-elect of the organization. A year after that, and the year after that, I'm the president of the organization. And once you're that, you get welcomed into a lot of other circles that you were never welcomed into before, you know, like sitting on the Baton Rouge Area Foundation board as a 20-something-year-old guy, or 30 maybe at that point, and everything else that comes along with that. And now your name, you know, has some value behind it. Even though you may have always valued it, you know, sometimes value is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And so now that comes with some value, but your social network, that social capital that you get from being in those circles changed everything for me. And, you know, I'm still through that time work-wise, I wasn't completely satisfied. I stayed in the payroll industry for probably about 5 years, working for 3 different companies, including the last 2 basically working from home, but selling software to payroll companies around the country, which was a great experience. I traveled a lot, or all around the country, but I worked from home. And those 2 companies were out of Indiana and San Antonio in Texas. And they knew nothing about what I was doing on the ground in Baton Rouge, like nothing. Like, you know, they could come here and my name could be in the business report, or I could be doing something with Form 35. They had no clue. And it really wasn't anything of meaning to them. And I felt that, man, it's like, I need to work for somebody local that would appreciate this, because if I'm the CEO or marketing director, I'm using this as a branding opportunity all day long. Here we got this young, talented guy doing all this work, and he works for us, but, you know, they didn't know anything about it. So in my head, I would have these dreams and these visions of me working for a startup. I had a vision of us literally being in the business report, sitting at a bench. I had it in my head, I don't know, I had a bench like Forrest Gump, of us, and being profiled in this magazine. And I was like, I know it's, and I never envisioned it by myself, by the way. I never saw me being by myself. I always knew it was somebody else that would do the things that I could not do, that I'm not strong at. I'm very, I do a lot of self-reflection, and I try to be very self-aware. So I know there's things I cannot do, and there's things I'm not willing to do, that I need a partner to do those things that they're very strong at. And so I didn't know what this was. People would ask, what are you going to do with all this? One of my good friends would always say, E, what are you going to do? You got to capitalize on all this stuff that you're doing, and then you got to monetize this. Like, you got to make a living off all this volunteer work that you're doing. And I was like, I know, man, I just don't know. I don't know how. I know it's coming. I just don't know how. And I don't know when, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but I have a good feeling. And so fast forward, you know, a few years, and I sign up for a Baton Rouge leadership class, which is put on by the Baton Rouge Chamber, the Baton Rouge area leadership. And I had friends of mine that had been saying, you need to get in it for years. And I was like, all right, so I'll you know, fill out the application, see if I get accepted. So I got accepted of the class of 2015, which you start in 2014 and finish in 2015. And you're taking 30 something, 40 something individuals from around the capital area. And you go through almost a year-long process of meeting once a month and talking about different aspects of what's going on in the city. It could be local, city, and state government. It could be the arts and communication. It could be healthcare. It could be the criminal justice system. And the first retreat that we went on, they put you in this little group because you do this thing called SimSoc. For simulated society. And so they put you in all these different groups, and there's a meaning, there's a chaos, a method to the madness of why they do it. But long story short, I met a guy in the group, in my little SimSoc group, who told me that he saw me speak at a Metro Council meeting when we were fighting for a fairness ordinance. And I spoke on behalf of Form 35 and just as a taxpaying citizen about why we need to have a fairness ordinance. And it was kind of a big deal at that point, and it never passed through the council, but it was a very highly politicized thing that we were doing. And I think, you know, people realized that there were young people willing to fight for the things that young people want out of a city and a home that they want to stay in. And he was like, man, I was impressed by that. I saw you speak at that. I was like, oh, really? I didn't, thank you. Appreciate that. And so, fast forward, we start talking. He was like, yeah, I started an engineering company. I'm an engineer. Well, technically, he wasn't an engineer then, but he's doing this engineering work. And he started his own company. And in a long way of an engineer speaking, he was trying to ask me, was I looking for an opportunity and, coming to like partner up and running the business development and marketing side of this firm, and that he had just started. And I was like, you know what? Maybe. I'm kind of looking for something like that. I always envisioned a startup. This is a Black man. Like, there ain't many Black engineers, civil engineers that exist in the city. I didn't even know what civil engineering really was. I knew engineering, but there's civil, there's structural, there's chemical, there's mechanical, there's all kind of engineering. And I was like, I don't really know what this is. He was like, no, you can figure it out. Like, go to YouTube. Like, literally, the first thing I did, I like went to YouTube and I'm typing civil engineering. And I'm like, okay. And I'm watching like the basic of basic things. I was like, so we like design roads, infrastructure. He's like, yeah, utilities, pipes, sewer, all this stuff. Like, that's what we can do. I said, but we can do that now. I was like, not really. We actually can't do that right now because we're not a licensed engineering firm. I was like, all right, so we do engineering, but we're not an engineering firm because he hadn't had his PE license yet. So we didn't have the firm license, but we do engineering work. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a huge lift. I said, but that's exciting. This is like interesting. And it's also interesting that for the first time in my life, someone that wanted to like work with me or bring me on to work trusted in my ability and not put me down on like the low end of just being a number. And I appreciated that. And I tell them that as much as I can. It's like, I will always appreciate that no matter where we end up, is that somebody gave me a chance, gave me a title of director, because titles do matter, because titles comes along with pay comes along with the title, and you'll never not be that again once you have that title. Or you at least can put that on your resume and say you'll never not be anything less than that. And I tell them that all the time as a Black man working with another Black man, is that we did that for one another at a time when we both needed each other. And we both took risk, and we've made it out on the other end. This is now 6 years ago that we came together and started this. And at times we've had as many as 25 or so employees. We probably average 10 or so, depends on how the work is. But, I was able to come with a startup, develop a marketing plan and a business strategy and branding strategy of my own, with not really any other help outside of Kali. And, here we are 6 years later, still doing our work, have increased revenues, 200, 300% at times. And, it's been fun. And then to bring it back to the vision I had, we get put in an article in the Baton Rouge Business Report where both of us are standing at our table in our conference room, him sitting, me standing, very much of the vision I had of us being profiled in the business report. Again, didn't know how it was going to happen. I just knew something like that could happen. And it validated the thoughts and the work that I put into my craft, which is, I'm a marketing, I didn't say that earlier, but I graduated with a business administration degree with a focus on a minor in marketing. So I'm always reading about marketing. I'm always reading about psychology and the understanding of why people do what they do and what makes them tick. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself an expert, but I have an expert level of knowledge on that. And I think for me, I always felt that I was underappreciated for that type of knowledge that I had. And I think part of it, I have a deep thought about marketers and race and what marketers typically look like. And I don't think I probably look like that. So I always got cast as a sales guy. And I was like, well, actually, I'm much more marketing. Sales falls under the marketing department. And I'm much more communications PR probably than I am someone who just needs to go sell your gadget. Like, I have a deeper thought process of how we do this thing than what people were hiring me to do. And that's been pay-wise, like my paying gig, that's been the trajectory that I went on and what allowed me to be where I am today. And that's kind of what I do for a living, is I go out and I meet with architecture firms and engineering firms and municipalities, public agencies like the park system, the airport, city, parish government, and just see if there's a place for us to do our work. And it's really about relationships. It's less about I'm going to sell you some engineering services, because it doesn't really work like that. It's much more about relationships, of meeting people where they are and having that deeper relationship and understanding of the type of work that you can do, that it's quality work, no matter if we're black owned firm, white owned firm, or whatever that may be. But we do quality work and we have a good reputation. And, you know, that's what has allowed us to be, I think, what we would define as successful. Um, so again, that's kind of, here we are. If I had to wrap all those 15 or 16 years up in probably the 5 or 6 minutes that I've been going on my soliloquy here, that's it.
So it's interesting that you ended up in civil engineering despite your experiences being mostly in marketing and sales, because most of the people who know me know that I have an academic background in international studies and international affairs. So I have a bachelor's degree in international studies from the University of New Orleans, and I have a master's degree in intercultural service leadership management from the School of International Training Grad Institute in Vermont, which meant that my area of study and my professional background probably is more of a fit for New York and Washington, D.C. than for Baton Rouge. So I myself had to have a career life change in this new environment and towards activism and social justice. And there were some things that I discovered and encountered while I was matriculating that pushed me away from international affairs. But I would like to say that 821 almost didn't happen. Not only because I found myself back in Baton Rouge and realizing international affairs was not something I wanted to do, but because everything in life is connected. My experiences at UNO as a result of being international studies major led me to the journey that led me to starting 821. That journey would not have started if it were not for my ninth grade geometry class. Because that ninth grade geometry class showed me how much I do not like math. And prior to geometry, I wanted to be a civil engineer.
Wow.
I wanted to design bridges. I wanted to design buildings. My whole thing was either architecture or civil engineering because I liked buildings. I liked architecture. I mean, even when I go to a city, one of my favorite things to see or take a picture of is the skyline, because I just love buildings and I like structures. But when I realized geometry was like the core part of civil engineering, and I had to work. I mean, I never failed geometry. I got a B. But for me, every other subject came easily. English, social studies, even foreign languages. It was easier for me to learn another language than it was for me to take math. Yeah. So math was not, I was like, I can't do this math stuff. Teach me how to count. Teach me how to count my money. I can count. Now the money counting, that I know how to do that. And my stints in retail also taught me how to calculate sales tax without a calculator. But engineering was something I almost didn't do. But I still think it's important. And I think it's even more important that, a Black men, which is, I did my research and looked at the group that you work for and work with. It's great that a Black firm is doing this work, because often in Baton Rouge or in Southeast Louisiana, you don't see a lot of us doing engineering work or doing the work of building and creating structures.
Right.
So
there's not a lot of
I think that's pretty significant. That's very significant.
It is. And one of the proudest moments for me was one of the first vertical structure type projects that we did, because a lot of our work has been, road and transportation based, sidewalks, roads, even the stuff under the ground, like the utility coordination and sewage work, and drainage work. But one of the first vertical restructures we worked on with an architect out at Southern University, which is now the building became the Valdry Center for Philanthropic Studies at Southern University. And we did all the civil engineering work on there. And Khalid, who's a graduate of Southern University, that was his first job like that, but also being the first one at his alma mater. And I was like, I'm proud for you that you have. And you could probably interview him, and he's got, it's just as interesting story as I do of how he came to be in engineering. Because he claims he holds the record for matriculation there from starting and then finishing his degree, which was like over a decade. But he was able to go back and actually do something on the campus that he trotted across for all those years. And I'm sure that had to make him feel good. It made me feel good for him. So, I would cherish the day that I'm going back to Alexandria or going up to Natchitoches and doing a project on the campus or something like that, because it makes you think, it's like, man, this is crazy how the world works and the universe works, that you could go through all this stuff and then you end up back here, like who would have thunk it? So yes, it is important for us. And there's not a lot of us in the space. And I'm just talking about Black folks in general. It's not a space that has been dominated by us. We personally, as a firm, try to do our role in going back and forward and getting the people from those areas that we are from. And I think that prior to last year, a lot of firms are like, well, we need to diversify our management. We need to diversify our work staff. We've been doing that. We won the first Diversity Star Award for the Baton Rouge Area Chamber the first year that they did it for the small businesses, because of the type of work environment and program that we had that was very welcoming and inclusive for new mothers that had just had, new mothers or folks of color. That was like one of the things that we sought out after, because a lot of those folks don't necessarily get the opportunity, even if they join some of these firms, or they feel out of place. If you've gone through a majority Black school your entire life through high school, then you went to Southern University, majority Black environment, then you go into a space where now you're the minority. That is a culture shift. I didn't have that. And that's why I said about my private school, public school upbringing, because I kind of felt comfortable because I'd been in those environments. But I know from some folks that is not an environment they've always known when they get into the professional world. And so for us, it was like, hey, come into this space, feel free to bring your whole self. We know things that are going on in the world, that if you want to talk about what happened out in Sterling, bring it. Come to the office. Let's have a conversation. We're going to take 20, 30 minutes out of the day, and we're just going to chop it up and talk about how pissed off you are. Or George Floyd, Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor, like these are things that are happening. And if you feel like something is messing with your mentals today, you need to get it off your chest real quick. Walk in the office and let's talk about it. But also don't feel bad about making mistakes, and that we're going to stereotype you of going, see, I knew we shouldn't have hired them. Because I know that is something that a lot of us have experienced of, like, you think you need to be 110% better than the next person because they always think that you're going to have less quality of work, or maybe your work ethic is not going to be there. And for us, it's like, we want to get you in here so you can feel comfortable. We're going to give you responsibilities that you probably would not have been bestowed upon you had you been in some other places, because we trust you. You're just like us. We all had to get a start somewhere. And, that is one of our kind of mantras that we have in the office of, like, we'll work with a lot of the people that may not have that opportunity elsewhere, and that it requires a lot of work. I'm not saying it's easy, because it requires a lot of time and investment in people. But for us, I think we've always operated with a greater sense of profit. It's been more about, we're going to have our profit and we need to make money. But we also know we need to reach back and get the colleagues and the Erics that other people aren't looking at as the next wave of talent, because that was us at some point, and somebody had to bring us up into the fold for us to get to the position that we're in.
As I reflect on what you're saying about your journey and just the work that you're doing with regards to being a Black engineering consulting firm, I just think that it's significant. And I also think it's even more significant that you all did that at Southern, because I didn't go to Southern, but my mom is a Southern alum. I grew up on Southern's campus. So I think it's very significant, that you all are doing something. And that's really, really, I don't know. I just think it's really awesome. My vocabulary is a bit limited to describe it, but I think it's awesome.
It's awesome. And I'll tell you another cool story. It's one of the first schools we did, because a lot of the work we're doing now, we're doing schools. So we're doing the civil engineering, which that entails the drainage and stormwater management plan, the parking lot and the pavement and grading, and sometimes the sidewalk that may go on the exterior of the campus. And so we're now on a second large scale school project. But the first one we did was University Terrace Academy, which is kind of behind Blue Cross Blue Shield. And that was a big, like 6-acre field or something like that had been back there for a long time, kind of in the middle of the neighborhood. And right there on the corner across from the neighborhood was my first manager's house when I sold insurance. I used to go to his house and house sit for him all the time. When they would go out of town, they had a dog, and I would go and meet him there sometimes to have lunch. And his house was right there across that field. So we would go over to his house, and I'd look at that field all the time. I was like, man, it's just a huge field in the middle of the neighborhood. And lo and behold, all these years later, 15 or I get that time, maybe 14 or so years later, here we are doing this new school right on that field that I looked across when I first moved to Baton Rouge. So, so it's like little things of how it's crazy how the universe works is one of those that I look back on. I was like, man, I don't know if I believe in a higher power, and I know things, for me, I think some things are meant to be, but it's very weird sometimes how things happen and how we end up where we are.
I find that in a city like Baton Rouge, we have a city of bubbles, and you are constantly stepping outside of your bubble. So how do you do that? Like that's just the question. Like, how do you do that? How do you step into these different bubbles and, as someone who is a business person, still find ways to make change and make an impact in the community or support the work of those who do?
I think a big part of it, and I started off, I think, our conversation by talking about, when my parents passed, and in particular my mom, the way I was, or one of the reasons I was able to do what I had is because I had a solid foundation. And, I know that a lot of people didn't have that upbringing and that foundation and that support. And that's the only reason why I consider myself being able to be where I am, of going through all kind of the heartache. And so when I see others that are maybe going through those things that may need that additional support, I kind of look back on what I needed at the time. And sometimes I had it, sometimes I didn't. And that is where my passion and my focus usually goes back to trying to assist those who may not now be in the quote unquote bubble or network that I'm in. And I want to try to take the access that I have now, the resources, and maybe the influence I have to help you out, whoever that may be, in the best way I can, because I know I was in your position in one way or another at some point. In many respects, I still am compared to some of my other peers. So that is one of those things. And it's also interesting to me, like my passions in general involve community development. It involves an uplifting of people. So much of the work I do outside, kind of part of what I do for a living, but a lot of it, what I do, volunteer work, is about equity. It's about equitable work. It's about us getting fair share of what we deserve as far as tax-paying citizens who also do quality work in our industry and various industries around here. So that is a passion of mine. I don't feel like I ever was a part of a particular group. I kind of got into it. But, again, I didn't come here with the network. My last name didn't mean anything in the city. My little sports I played growing up didn't mean anything in this city. So I had to really do all this work outside of my paying gig to even get the notice that I think, that I have now. So that is a big part of who I am today, and how I got to where I am is because I did all these other things. It was Dialogue on Race. It was Blues Foundation. It's Manship Theater. It's the Louisiana Art and Science Museum. It's the Downtown Development District. It's Ochsner, Baton Rouge Area Chamber, Capital Area United Way, all those things. And I know I'm still probably missing Apex Collegiate Academy, which was a charter school I helped start and run as a board chair. These are all passions of mine, of people doing great work and where their heart is in the right place, that I know that if I'm at the table, I bring in my perspective and my experiences that are lacking in most of those spaces. And that's why, and I'm also an unabashed and sometimes unapologetic about speaking my truth, because my truth matters too. And that, I think, is refreshing to a lot of older people who may not come from the places and spaces that we come from. And, that's usually why I keep getting invited to do more stuff, and I don't ask. I've never asked to be on one board that I'm on. It's all been invited, and I turn down probably more than you might imagine, just because I also want to be respectful of the organizations that I've committed to, because they want all of me, or at least as much as they can get of me, and not a part of me. And I'm trying to be respectful about what I do. But I know that my voice matters and representation matters. And I know particular instances where if I had not been sitting at the table, there's organizations who may have not gotten funded. Like, I know that. And another part of the work I do is very quiet work, in a sense, because a lot of it's done around a board meeting, or it's around a committee meeting. And it's not something that you can go take pictures of and put on social media. And I'm pretty active on social media, but a lot of the work I do, I can never put on social media. A lot of the work I do is very quiet behind the scenes, impactful nonetheless. And a lot of people, and this is why I would go back to, I think, somewhat relating to you, some of the work that I do is very lonely because I have to do a lot of it and I can't talk about it. And I definitely can't talk about it to the people that I helped, because now it comes off of, hey man, you know what, I helped you out, and whether you know it or not, I vouch for you. But there's a lot of that. But I need more of me, and I know there are, but I need more of me's at the table, that where it's not felt like it needs to be me. The next person that comes along, she can sit at the table and be like, I got you, I got y'all, I got us. And so part of what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to look out for is I need other people. I need more of us out there, so they're not all calling me to be the person to sit at the table, because I can only do so much. And I am still in my own bubble. I realize that I have a limited network and I have a limited bubble. As much as I think it may be expanded or I'm outside that bubble, I'm still limited. I know there's people doing great things out there that I just have no clue about, as connected as I am. And so, I'm trying to be somewhat self-aware of that.
A lot of the work that I do is not necessarily to show the world that I do it. It's just to do it. And I'm an only child. I was raised an only child. And a lot of people say that only children are spoiled and we get everything we want. No, when you're an only child, that might be true. When you're an only child, you learn how to do things on your own pretty quickly, because you don't have an older brother or sister that you can go to. And when you become, a teenager or in college, you don't have like you don't have that kind of support that a lot of people with lots of brothers and sisters and cousins have. And I grew up very different from a lot of Black families in America. I didn't have a lot of cousins and I had a very small family, very small family. So for me, I had to learn how to do things on my own pretty quickly. If my mom couldn't show me how to do it, or my grandmother couldn't show me how to do it. And that energy, that independent energy is still how I roll. So sometimes for me, I do things and I'm a one-man show. I feel like a one-man show sometimes, or I do things and I'm like the face of it, because I'm like, I can't wait on other people to do that work. I got to do that work because no one else will do it. you
Sure.
know.
Sure.
So that's the energy I have. I don't do it for fame. I do it because it needs to be done. And
Yeah.
just like you, manifesting, you want to manifest the vision that you have, for your life or for your community, and you manifest it and it comes true.
Sure.
In some way.
I can relate to that. As I mentioned, my older brother, who actually passed away a couple of years ago, was 8 years older than me, and my sister's 12, 13 years older than I am. So in many respects, I grew up like the baby and almost as the only child for a large part of my life, because they were out of the house. And then it was really just like me and my mom in the house. And so I was somewhat of an only child from about, 10 years old up, 9 or 10 years old up. And then, when I moved away here and my brother was in a different state, my sister was in a different state, I didn't really have those like siblings and aunts and uncles and cousins that I would just always be around. There was like a few of them, and then that was pretty much it. So I whether it was just naturally or organically, retreated into a very independent, I'm not gonna say recluse, but I was like, I really went into like my own thing of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to accomplish. And I tried to I didn't let a lot of outside influence come in. And I still to this day operate somewhat in that sense of, I know what I want to do. I know what my passions are. I know what my truth is. And so when I get in these spaces and I get around this table, I'm going to let this come out. Because if I'm silent, then I'm not helping anybody. I'm not helping myself. I'm not helping the people that help me to get to this point. And I'm definitely I'm not helping the people that are out there doing the work that I value. So that is a big part of what I do and why I do. And I do it in the manner that I do is because I always feel that I was very independent and I didn't come into this game with much. And I treat it as such, is that I don't have a lot to lose in a sense that some of you do, so I'm going to be who I am and say what I say. And, for the most part, it works, because I think if I'm sitting on the table, it's like, man, this is a young brother coming in here. This is refreshing, him speaking the way he speaks, because a lot of times you get around there and it's yabba, 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 and no offense, but there's people that get on these things that are there because their boss and their corporation pays for them. And so they get a seat at the table by default, and they're really not passionate about it. There's no fault of their own. They're just the next person who has to fill that seat because this organization pays dollars to this group that we're with. And I'm at the table not because of our company and spending a lot of dollars because we're a small business. I'm there because of my passion and what I believe. And so I'm usually one of the voices that speaks out a lot about in a lot of these meetings I'm in, just because I'm passionate. And some folks are just there, again, no offense to them, but a lot of times people are just there because they have to be.
There's a difference between having a seat at the table with a folding chair and having a seat at the table that's like one of those like big chases with the ottoman at the end. There's a big difference. Yeah. So, and you're really making me rethink the whole seat at the table, because sometimes people have a seat at the table because that seat was a reserved seat for them. And
That's right.
some of us got to pull up the seats to the table and squeeze in. So it's like,
Yeah,
it's,
you like you said, you kind of pulling your little seat that I know my mom and them used to have that. They would go to the games and they just had like a little pad in the back that folded up,
yeah,
put it down so it wouldn't be so hot on the little metal seat. Yeah, sometimes you have some of those when some folks come sit down in chairs with nameplates on them that's specially reserved for them through their legacy. And I'm like, all right, we
right.
different
Yeah.
chairs here, but I'm gonna scoop my little seat up either way, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna make sure I get my little coffee and my cookies too, and say what I gotta say while I'm in here. And learn the game. That's a big part of it. You gotta learn the game because there is a way that all this stuff is connected and how things get done. But if you just keep your eyes and ears open, you'll learn how things get done around here. And that's kind of who I am. And I'll just say this, and I don't know what your next question is, but I also just want to say this is that a lot of my friends ask me, why do I do what I want to do? Why do I do all these things? Why am I involved with 7 or 8 boards and all these various committees? And I tell them often is that I had to do these things. The brand that you know today came from that. I didn't have a law degree. I wasn't someone who was a professional who had a trade that can use their hands to design and build something. That's not my background. What I have is a lot of the mind that I have. It's the marketing background. I know how to build a brand that allows me to get into spaces and do impactful work. So if I don't do all these things, then that decreases my value. Just like if you're a lawyer and you're not consistently, or an engineer and not consistently doing your continuing education and out there going getting referrals from new client after new client, that diminishes your clientele, which also diminishes what you can bring home and your value. And so for me, a lot of what I do is, one, passion, but two, it's a part of the brand. It's a part of the brand of what I am that keeps me in the spaces that I'm in. As soon as I stopped all that, I'm not getting calls anymore. My company's name is not attached to that, Eric Dexter board of directors. Now the company name is gone. So and I say, young Black folks that are doing startups, we got to figure out a whole other way around sometimes to just get the seat at the table to do things that other people that ask me these questions, like, why do you do it? I'm like, yes, because you don't have to do this. Like, you could have gotten an introduction through whoever. I didn't. I had to go the long way around to get to this table. But now that I'm here, I ain't going nowhere. And I'm definitely not closing the door. I'm trying to open this thing up. I'm trying to kick it open so I can get more of us in here. That's the long way. I heard a story of these guys. We went on this canvas trip with the Baton Rouge area chamber years ago. And we were you were doing sister cities. So I think we were in Orlando and Tampa on this particular trip. And we went to one of these software developers that did video games. It was EA Sports, but it was another branch that was in this building. And these two guys had worked for this company that they sold it to. It might have been Tiburon or one of those companies, but they sold it. Part of the deal was that they get to work in the company. And the guys were saying that we didn't really like this company. We were like, should we just sell and just get in there for a little bit and get the hell out and go through our next thing? They were like, no, we're going to be a cancer. We're going to eat this thing from the inside until we work our way up to leadership, and then we will control this company too. And he said, so they strategically went through the company and got to the top again. So now they were not only running the company that they created and sold to this company, they were running that company too. And they were able to now do the things that they've always wanted to do with the power and access of the company that they sold it to, instead of just saying, I quit and I'm not at the table no more. So I always think of that as like, am I better at the table, even though it's not an environment that is really something that is welcoming? Or do I just say, you know what, I'm good. I'm not going to be a part of that. I don't want my name attached to it. And then that organization just keeps doing what they do. My philosophy is that I will get on the inside of it and not necessarily cancers. There's probably another word except cancer. Might be the Holy Ghost. Maybe a better word that you could describe of getting inside somebody to do great things. But I want to be that Holy Spirit type of thing, be that spirit, as opposed to being a cancer. I want to be that spirit that changes something from the inside. And I can do that if I'm at the table. I cannot do that if I never ever show up and I don't accept that invitation. So, sometimes that means you got to tie your name at the very beginning to something that is doesn't have a great reputation, with the understanding that I know they have a foundation that can do some great things that just misguided. Well, I need to get in there and do a lot of quiet work, a long game, a long game, a long strategy to come out on the other end. That's going to make a very big impact for some other folks, whether they know it or not. So that is the work that I do for the non-paying stuff. That is probably as important as anything that I do for, with my salary. That keeps me going, honestly. Like that's my passion. That keeps me going. And part of what I've missed probably over these last 12 months is not being able to see people and experience these things that you don't get to really get through a virtual call.
I miss that too. I miss this whole idea of like those weak ties and strong ties and having that balance, and also having the people that you're able to see, in passing, and still kind of catch up with them and see how they're doing. I miss that as well. And that all goes into this idea of building relationships. And that's one of the final questions I want to ask you, because we've talked about a lot, but one of the things that I often feel needs to be discussed, and I try and discuss with a lot of people I've interviewed, is this idea of collaboration, this idea of bringing more people together and building relationships. Because when I was starting off, and just to be very transparent, when I was starting A21, I knew that the keys to the kingdom would be being a part of different associations and organizations and different things like that. But I was starting A21 with my own money. I didn't have a lot of money or a lot of friends or any of that. So I had to basically do a lot of things on my own and organically. I mean, with A21, a lot of the people that have followed A21, has been organic. Like literally me building it from the ground up. And I think about how easily it would have been if I were connected to a Forum 35 or things like that. But a lot of these organizations are not financially accessible to people, especially those in the activist community. And a lot of these organizations may be perceived as disconnected from non-affluent folks in this community. What are some things that you think needs to happen so that would strengthen the relationship that organizations like the Baton Rouge Area Foundation and other like nonprofit associations for millennial folks, will have to the community, especially those who are doing activism and change making, who may not necessarily have the same budgets or people power that other organizations may have?
Well, I think it starts by communication. I have to understand, if I was sitting on the other side of the table and I would be a potential donor, or at least a liaison to the donors of A21, what do you need to be what you would call quote unquote successful and running at an optimal level? What is it exactly specifically? Like, I need specifics and I need dollars. What do you need? Now, a lot of folks can't tell you that. And it's like, well, if you don't know, then how am I gonna know? So I would start from there. I mean, it sounds very like black and white, but I mean, in actuality, that's what a lot of these folks that have money want to know. Like, they don't have time to do I'm gonna do a deep dive and discovery. Like, I need you to come to the table with it buttoned up as much as you can, and then we can work with you, because we got a lot of stuff we got going on. And if you're just coming to me asking for $10,000, they might tell you to get out the door. Because I need you to come asking for more than that, but also something that's going to make an impact, because they will equate what you're asking for to actually the impact that you're making. It's kind of weird how that happens, but sometimes the more you ask for it, it's like, okay, you might be trying to really do something that's going to be an impact. So it starts by communications of understanding, and I'm just saying A21, it could be any nonprofit or activist or advocacy type organization. It's understanding what it is that you're trying to do. On the other side of it, a lot of these organizations are also in their bubble, and the people that they work with have been referred to them by people that they already know. And so you get a limited amount of an influx of new blood, new spirit, people doing things that they don't know, about. And so they also need to have folks that are reaching out and going into areas that they're not in. because oftentimes they have a very, very, very limited space. Very, very, as much as you think their network is deep, it's still very tight window of people that they work with on a consistent basis. And so they know who they know, they trust who they know. And these dollars that they're getting from their donors, they're going to divert those dollars towards the people that they know and they trust, because they believe that they'll do a good job. It'll make them look good. They'll get more dollars coming in. And then that's how you keep the train rolling. So again, I think it starts with communication of these parties, different types of communication. But I think you need to understand of what it is that you're trying to do. Be open to people giving you advice. And I know sometimes this is hard, because I work, like I said, I work for a startup, and sometimes people will give you advice on, have you thought about this? Maybe you need to change this up. And like, how you gonna tell me to change something up? And like, I've been doing this work. I'm sure you probably got it. It's like, have you thought about that? It's like, but sometimes people are coming from the right space, even though they haven't done the work and the research that you have. They just are only operating with their limited knowledge of what you do, and then trying to connect it to the dollars and the access and the capital, and so they're thinking sometimes in the right place. And I know sometimes it comes off as being disingenuous or not being open or welcoming, but because I've been, and like I said, I've been at those tables. I hear the conversations that happen behind the scenes, and oftentimes it's you may only take one person sitting there to go, actually, I don't think that's how this particular organization works. And then next thing you know, things change. So that network and that value are key. Getting into that network, but understanding what your value is, because if you know how to communicate what your value is, that's a big start. A lot of folks just don't understand how to communicate what their value is. They know how to communicate what they do. And this goes back to my sales side. You could tell me what it is, how you made it, the name of it, the how and the what and the who. But if you can't tell me the why, then that's an issue. Like, why are you doing this, and who is an impact, and what does this mean to them? Like, that's the story that you got to come to the table with. And if you don't have that fleshed out, that's probably something, there's other organizations that you can work with to kind of get that kind of honed in, because the people that get funds, the people that get the capital continuously, they've been doing this for years. They know how to write the grants. They know how to get the access. And it's a gravy train. It keeps rolling on year after year after year, sometimes no matter if they're making an impact or not. That's just being as frank as I could be on that.
One last question I want to ask to end this, because we've been chopping it up for almost 90 minutes. You have been, obviously, in your interview, you've talked about having lots of jobs and lots of occupations. So you've been interviewed, and you probably had this moment where you're like, man, I wish I talked about this. Man, I wish I talked about that. What is one thing that you want to say that you haven't had a chance to say, or what is something that you want to express or clarify that you want to express before we conclude this interview and wrap up this conversation?
It probably could be a lot, because I could talk a lot about stuff like this. I'm very philosophical in that way of having these type of conversations. But I would, it probably has to do, again, going back to the work that I do and the reason that I do it. And there may be a perception, it's like the meme that you see of what my parents think about what I do, what my friends think I do, and what I actually do. And I would just say, man, it is not easy. I told this to my girlfriend last night. We were going, it's like, we were asking her nephew about if he thought the work that we did was hard, if what we were doing. My girlfriend owns a salon and does hair. And she was like, yeah, I don't think you work that hard because you have help around the salon. But he assumed that because like I'm on a laptop all day, or that his other aunt's on a laptop all day, that we work really hard. And I was like, you know what? I don't consider myself working hard, but I do hard and complex work that can't everybody do. So I'm humble enough to believe that I'm not the hardest working person there is, but I do some work that is a fit for me and my skill set that is not a fit for everyone else. And so I'm saying that not to trumpet myself, but to say that if you can understand what it is that you do really, really well, that may be as well as anyone else doing it, focus on that and not so much of your weaknesses. A lot of us for a lot of reasons, and I think especially since social media has expanded of what we value, look to the things that we aren't good at and we see other people are good at, and they put that shining and they put the Instagram filter on it. And we're like, man, I wish I could look like that, or I wish I could be doing better graphics like that. It's like, well, that may not actually be your strongest suit. What your strongest suit is could be this here, and this is what you should focus on, and this is what you should highlight. And so I say for me, it's connecting the dots. I'm a dot connector, and I connect people, places, things, ideas. That's kind of what I do for a living. I read and I'm observant, and so I can see a lot of things happening before they happen. And that's how I kind of connect things. And I think for me, being in leadership position, that's what I focus on, is like the strategy and the vision from where we're going. The day-to-days of stuff like that is not my strength. So I need to rely on and partner with people who do those things well. And so I would just say from my experience of, my young 38 years, almost 38 years, is know the things that you're well at, that you do really, really great at, and that you love doing and that you're passionate about. And I think we'll all be better off if all of us did those things that we were great at and did not focus so much on the things that we were not great at. Everything's a self-help to do this. Well, you might not actually be good at that. So self-help to do better at the things that you already do really, really great. And I think if all of us were great at what we did and we're passionate about, I think as a society, we'd be much better off.
Well, I will let that be the last word, because that was a word. Yeah, but thank you so much, Eric, for taking the time to chop it up with me and be a part of the Expanding Our Roots interview series. I know I've been trying to reach you for a while, so it's great to actually talk. And it's great to have a conversation with you. I think this is the longest that we've spoken ever. So this is pretty awesome. This is great. But yeah, thank you so much.
We have to do it again. And again, I want to appreciate the work that you're doing. And I know I don't make it to I know a lot of it is virtual and some of the in-person stuff that you were doing. I just want to know I notice it and I appreciate it. Sometimes it's from afar, but I just want to know that I do appreciate the work that you're doing. Keep doing it. Even if you may not feel you're getting the attention or the resources that you deserve, it will be noticed. Things will come to fruition, and you will get what you want. I think if you keep helping other people that need the help. So I'll end with that.